Good evening for part 2 of Meditation 101 Myth Busting. Just give us one quick second here. We're just trying to get Instagram working as well. While we wait a couple more moments, if it doesn't work, we'll still proceed. Right, so we'll just continue. So this is part 2 of the myth busting sessions. Last week we had discussed and explored about this aspect of closing one's eyes when it comes to meditation. And again, these are sessions with respect to Raja Yoga, what Raja Yoga is about. And the second one really actually ties very, very much smoothly, I would say, is about the second aspect of meditation. Is meditation about clearing my mind, at least the meditation that's used in this particular type of study. And before we go into that, there is a very well-known symbol that's used in yoga. And many have probably already seen this particular symbol, which is of a lotus. And there's also pictures of people sitting in what they call the lotus position. And this is also a very significant symbol that's used in Raja Yoga, but it has a very different meaning to it. And many look at this aspect of a lotus in terms of different studies, or you have a lotus pose in terms of physical yoga and certain meditation that are out there. It's about seeing a lotus and again, what kind of feelings that creates. But in this study, in terms of this aspect of self-mastery, the lotus pose or the lotus image is actually what I experience. So not about picturing anything. And you can, but it only gets you so far as, but I am actually the embodiment of what a lotus symbolizes, meaning that I stay in this sense of integrity of who I am. On the basis of the study of experiencing myself to be a soul. And in that sense of this super reality that I live in and experience, because of that, I can be unaffected by things around me. So why am I mentioning about that in terms of this meditation 101 is once again about self-mastery. What does self-mastery look like? It is that experience of the sense of who I am, my inner world, how I experience everything around me has so much to do with what's going on inside of how I think, what my awareness is. So this brings on this aspect of, do I close my eyes or not? Yes, I've had conversations with a student who was quite, new in the study, and she said it was a challenge, understandable, because closing the eyes was a very lovely experience, that there was peace, and it was hard to concentrate the moment she opened her eyes. However, it took some time, and we also went through, which we can't cover in these short sessions, but we went through the history of how the study started. And of course, if you're interested, if you wish to take the actual Raja Yoga course, and then we can really explore a bit more about that piece. But in my personal experience of being in this study, in terms of realizing how I'm learning this aspect of Raja Yoga, self-mastery, who is teaching me actually is in fact God, Supreme Soul. He holds this information, no human being can. And there's some really important elements about that. You have the soul, God himself, who has to come to give this information, not a bodily being. And so this aspect of being able to belong and experience that I am not of this world. I actually belong to the Supreme Soul, just a guest in this world. So you can already get a flavor from just what is being shared right now. There's some pieces of information of understanding. And the intention of that is to actually awaken this awareness of who I am. So with that in mind, thoughts are important to be able to wake up that awareness. Me conveying this information that I've learned and I have been taught is that these are a series of points of understanding that really start to awaken something in my mind, but in my awareness as well. My sense of a perspective of who I am, something that's ancient in there. Thoughts are really important. And this is why this aspect, what is meditation for? Many use it, of course, to be able to have a peaceful experience, understandable. But Raj Yoga is really about waking up to this sense of who you are that you have forgotten. And to be able to do that, it is really about starting to shift how I am seeing things. But one of the things is that whether I'm aware, I'm a spiritual being or not, this function of thinking is always operating, regardless of what you are aware of, what roles, whether you're in happiness or in sorrow, stress, or in the sense of relaxation, there is always thinking. So it's really about the quality of my thinking. And my quality of thinking can reinforce a way of how I see things, how I define myself, how I identify. Or it can also take me into a dark place. It can also take me into a light place. But the thing about, so this is the aspect of thoughts and thinking. Meditation is just a very fancy word of saying I am redirecting the way I'm thinking to be able to support this awakened awareness. And so what we'll cover next week is in terms of what meditation is for, is about meaningful thoughts. And tonight's session is really about clearing my mind. Is that really possible? Or is it that my mind has a function that we are already using in our day-to-day life? And so it's understandable that individuals want peace of mind, and that feeling that clearing one's thoughts, just not thinking, would be able to create that feeling of peace. However, there's a few things, again, misnomers in terms of understanding, is that our mind is actually meant to function, to think. And the problem isn't the mind itself, it's actually the quality of my thinking. So how my mind functions. So it's not that it functions, that's the issue, it's how it's functioning. Is that it's the quality of my thinking that is actually taking me into a negative way of seeing things, taking me into a victimizing way, taking me into a sense of hopelessness. And it is really about how to shift the way I think. But thinking is actually very much connected as well to awareness. And I know many souls find it very difficult to understand the difference between these two, but they actually work together. So in a sense, if you know deep in your heart that, for example, that you are very much, I know somebody, for example, who's very good at negotiating with individuals and creating very, very respectful, partnerships and relationships. just with anybody. He already knows he has that capacity. So this is like a deep knowing that now that's in his background awareness. Because he's accepted that sense of identity of himself, then it's very easy for the thoughts that support that, to serve that, to actually just emerge whenever he's in connection with others, especially to create these types of networks in order to create a sense of community. Then his thoughts are going to be, well, how am I going to increase my networking? How am I going to reach out to others? Because he already has this knowing, this sense of acceptance of himself that then basically colors his thinking. And also then that awareness he now has of himself is the frame how he sees things around him. So that's just like a simple example. Hopefully that makes sense. But we actually have lots of different, awarenesses that can change through the day that really affect the way we think. And most of them have to do with our roles, our responsibilities, our relationships with someone, with respect to someone else, our positions that we have. And it has so much to do with, it goes into our background awareness because we've accepted it as something as part of who we are, or it is now a priority. It is relevant at this time. I'm in this context. And so my awareness is such in a way that it starts to color and inform how I think. So in this aspect of Raja Yoga, in terms of, again, self-mastery, that I am really learning to cultivate my inner world, my experience of how I see things, so that it can also affect my outer world in terms of how I make decisions, how I respond to others, how I interact with others, how I see things coming up that may not be expected, has so much to do with my awareness. Is there an awareness that can stay beyond all of these things, but it's not flighty, it's not superficial, but it's actually very grounded and very reliable in that sense? Because our awareness is through the day, sometimes just catered to one situation, to another situation, and even just our sense of self and self-confidence changes depending on where I am at. And so this overarching eternal awareness of my real self, to wake that up requires thoughts, because these are thoughts that are very unique thoughts, actually, thoughts that are actually based on eternal truths. So a sense of identity of who I am that I have been longing to actually discover. And signs of that is peacelessness. And so it's all very much connected. We're looking for peace, and we don't realize the quality of our thoughts are creating peacelessness. But the quality of our thoughts is informed because of an awareness of myself that continues to create heaviness, or is so far from who I am and causes me to have moral distress if I make decisions or respond in a way that is honoring that role, or might seem like it's honoring that role, but it's dishonoring my value system. And so certain thoughts, very unique, eternal truths that I am actually thinking about. And the intention of thinking about these things is it starts to resonate. And this is then going to be connected to next week's session about, the purpose of meditation is about developing recognition and meaningfulness. And so that is the intention of what thoughts are for, is to be able to awaken this resonance, this recognition that I've always had, but It's timing is one thing. And another thing is actually a level of disinterest in terms of things that have been fulfilling. And so certain thoughts that are very useful to be able to wake up that recognition. So you can say that's a tool. What meditation is for is to foster, an eternal awareness about myself. And so when it comes to this aspect of clearing the mind or to not think, which is a big myth actually in terms of meditation. And again, there's different types of spiritual studies, so to speak, out there. So I just need to just be clear of what I am looking for in terms of my spiritual journey. And is Raja Yoga something that I feel is supporting me? And if it isn't, that's totally fine. Then I just need to continue to look for what I'm looking for. But because this is the intention of what Raj Yoga is about, is really to gain this sense of self-mastery, waking up to these capacities of who I am. So there's a huge focus on awareness. And so my type of thinking actually will either support this eternal awareness of myself or can take me away. Because as mentioned, whatever I think about can actually cultivate an awareness and an attitude. And I'm sure souls know about that as well, is that you think a certain way about something and you let that track of thinking continue in a certain situation, a certain scene, it starts to develop this long standing certain types of feelings and perceptions about that situation, about that person. But meditation, as mentioned, is basically harnessing the capacity of the mind. In this particular study, taking advantage, the mind has to think. And in fact, when we as souls were in our state where we were with full power, we had that integrity. We didn't lose our sense of self, our sense of identity, our sense of awareness. In a sense, is really our purity, our pure state of just being a soul and being very clear that I am separate from the physical, and yet I can still operate in the physical. At that time, my mind, the quality of my mind was also at its highest state. So at that time, thinking was very natural of only elevated things, creative things, constructive things. And there was no traces of this acquired personality that we have now. This personality, which actually isn't who we are, which is, we often call it the five vices in terms of, and it's so linked to my awareness of myself that isn't who I am. And so I have lost access to my original qualities. And so because of my original qualities, such as peace, love, bliss, power, truth, harmony, and purity, these are my true qualities as a soul. Now we seem to have to work really hard to merge these qualities. And sometimes it's actually quite laborious. But there was time when I was at my highest state as a soul, and thinking in a healthy way was just completely natural. And now in the study, we use meditation to gently direct my thinking, to be able to have thoughts that actually are of my original self, my eternal self. And there is, I guess you can say, as you continue in the study, if you ever decide to go into the study and explore and experiment, is that what we'll talk about next week is that meditation helps to have something click inside, something that resonates. And the intention, if we use the word meditation, is to have as many of those instances where it resonates inside. this aspect that I am a soul, but also what kind of soul. Who do I really belong to? What really defines me? These are like thoughts that wake you up, wake up some deep memory inside. And when that triggers, which we'll discuss more about next week, then it's as if you're on an upward spiral. And the thoughts, because there's an increasing interest of something that has awoken inside a memory. And then meditation, this having to really gently redirect the thoughts becomes actually more natural, in the sense that my thinking very naturally is pulled to think about these things that resonate with me. And so Raj Yoga is often called easy Raj Yoga, because it is not meant to be violent whatsoever. However, we also want to acknowledge in this session about, is it about clearing the mind, is that in this study we also acknowledge rebirth, and that with rebirth we have had previous experiences that can be deep entrenched habits. And so why we mention about that is because I've also known many individuals who struggle with staying awake in terms of using this tool of meditation to be able to awaken this sense of awareness. And so that is, again, because of, in history, previous births of wanting that experience of peace and trying to numb the mind, clear the mind, not realizing the mind isn't the problem, it's the way I'm thinking. And the way my thinking is driven by the quality of my awareness. And so you can also try to clear your thoughts, but it can only last for a certain amount of time. And usually, if you'll notice, clearing your thoughts does have an element of a bit of force and violence in it. And so there's a connection in terms of clearing my thoughts and actually closing my eyes, because it is all about shutting the world out. And that's why we mention it's like, no, one just needs to just really increasingly be honest and clear of what they're looking for in their journey. If that is what's satisfying for you, then totally fine. Raj Yoga may not be for you. However, if that you feel that you're looking for something else, in terms of, it's not about just trying to shut the world out. And sometimes it's understandable. It feels like there's no solutions, or it's satisfying enough. That's completely understandable. But again, in this study, it is really about mastering these capacities that are already in me. The soul, I may not realize I'm a soul, but we already have this capacity of thinking. Can I use that in a way that's not just for coping, but to actually break free? And that's what we say. What peace is. In Hindi, the word is much more accurate, which is mukti, which is liberation, is what is connected to what peace really is. It's about completely being free, but in a sustainable way that I can actually experience being free while in action and interaction, because of the basis of this real eternal understanding. And so we will have a little reflection right now. And if you ever have any questions, you're welcome to type in the chat box. You're also welcome to email the center as well, calgary@ca.brahmakumaris.org. Our email address is on the website as well. And so next week, we will go more into this aspect of meditation in terms of meaningfulness, in terms of recognition. And so once again, inviting you, if you are open, keeping the eyes open, again, being very casual, informal. Create this attitude of being very easy on myself and on the mind. I can use this tool, we call it meditation, but this tool of thinking in many ways. And one way is just even just to begin to watch my mind. It needs to think. It's trying to express itself, like trying to signal me. Sometimes it can signal saying that there's some not so good feelings inside. Sometimes it's signaling me with thoughts that everything is okay, but just learning to be one who's just watching the temperature of my mind or the temperament of my mind. Like as if I am a nurse or a doctor, a health practitioner, just watching my mind just so it helps me to see what my inner world is like. Sometimes it's very useful when, and it takes time to practice this, that sometimes the thoughts just don't stop. There might even be a lot of emotions, but it is possible to learn to watch my thinking for a bit of time, and it can actually slow down. And this is based on personal experience. It can actually slow down. And I can even start to even ask myself, there's this kind of thinking going on. What's causing this thinking? What's causing these feelings to come up? Do I really feel that these feelings, this thinking, is all of who I am? And maybe it feels like it is, these feelings, this track of thinking. But if I asked myself honestly, what kind of feeling do I really want to have within myself, in my inner world? What kind of values really speak to me? I'm using an example right now, just an example. Maybe the thoughts are about feeling bad about the self, or feeling that something from the scenes in front of me had made me feel bad. But now I'm really reflecting, is that all I believe myself to be? Do I feel in my life there has been inspiring moments seeing others, of qualities that actually resonate with me? So just using this as an example, I'm actually redirecting my thinking. I'm also observing my thinking. I'm also connecting to next week's session, starting to ask myself questions. All of this takes thoughts. Ask myself questions to start to awaken my heart. Not just the mind, not just intellectual. What I mean, heart meaning significant. This is the intention of what, if we want to use that word, meditation is for. So I welcome you to experiment. That's the most important thing. Identify challenges, experiment. Experiment when things feel okay. Experiment when things feel very ordinary. Experiment times when you're able to actually, like driving, when you're at the red light, when you have some free time. And also then aim to try to experiment when there are times when things are a bit tough, because it really has a lot to do with practice. And the intention of these sessions is also to develop a sense of enlightenment of how my mind functions and what it's for. So thank you again for joining with us this evening. So these sessions are recorded, and so you can always go back to the first part, which was last week. And I believe they're under public events. And so if you ever have any questions, again, email the center, and we will see you next week. Same time, 8 o'clock to 8:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time for our third part. Otherwise, our next session is tomorrow's experience. That's a 1 hour reflective experience, meditation experience, 6:30 to 7:30. And then we have our second part of the 4-part series on Friday, 8 o'clock to 8:30, which is in light of Shivratri. So again, exploring and experiencing different qualities of God. Praise of Shiva. So thank you again for joining. Om Shanti.